Like, do you even know who you are? I am black, biggity black, American, yes, but bigger than that. Spitting opinions, rooted in facts. Hope you aware the culture is bigger than plats. Used to be a summit, now we got a podcast. Gave you something, you ain't know you want it. Black American podcast, Black American podcast. You might hear something.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, hi.
Hello, I'm hoping everyone can hear me well. We are here today to have our discussion about mental health stigmas and as they relate to finances in the African American community. My name is Karla McDay. I'm a mental health therapist, licensed independent social worker. I work in Akron, Ohio at Minority Behavioral Health Group. We are the only Black-owned, nationally accredited agency approved to do interventions that are African-centered. We work from a model developed by Dr. Linda James Myers from the Columbus, Ohio State University. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. They are Dr. Neighbors, and Dr. Harold Neighbors is an applied social psychologist with a methodological background in survey research. And I'm going to allow him to introduce himself momentarily. He'll be followed right after by Omari Aarons. Omari has worked in Fortune 150 companies his entire career as a disruptive leader and transformative coach. So I will allow you all to introduce yourselves.
Okay, thank you. Just by way of a brief introduction, my name is Dr. Neighbors, and I've been doing research in a university setting for my entire career. So I'll be speaking to everyone today from the perspective of someone who has been collecting data for quite a while, for the last 10 to 12 years, focusing on Black men. I don't have any clinical training per se, but all of my collaborators have been clinically trained mental health therapists. I really don't believe you can do good research without collaboration, with somebody coming from the clinical perspective. So I hope to share with you today some of the things we've learned from our studies. I'll say I was trained at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. You can probably see that Block M back there. So I'm a Wolverine. Right now I'm working at Tulane University in the School of Public Health. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. Mr. Aarons.
Hi, everyone. Hello, Karla, Dr. Neighbors. Good to be with both of you on this panel, and good to see everyone in the audience. I'm Omari Aarons. I'm the founder and managing partner of the Aarons Group, which is a diversity inclusion workplace consulting firm that I founded after working for over 15 years in corporate America. And here representing Black executive men, which is a group that really focuses on helping Black men in particular who have experiences in corporate America be happy, whole, and healthy on this pathway to inner peace. And I'm speaking from my own experience, both as a human resources manager, director, and then executive in corporate America for 8 of the 15 years there. My clinical experience and counseling training as a chaplain and as a licensed minister in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. So really glad to be with you today.
Wonderful. Thank you to you both. I'm going to open us up with the umbrella question. And here it is. I'd like for you both to respond, and we'll just keep the format with Dr. Neighbors first, followed by Omari, if that's okay. How are some ways, or what are some ways, mental health stigmas show up in the African American community or in the Black community?
Yeah, so I think I'll just mention one word to start us off, and that word is silence. silence. The stigma, unfortunately, the stigma attached with, whatever it is that we mean by mental health. And our studies show that Black folks have a lot to say about mental health, but we also start to think almost immediately about mental illness when somebody says mental health. So there are some issues with that. But I'll say the word silence because the stigma that is associated with mental health, mental illness, mental disorders, psychological distress influences people to stop talking to each other, influences Black people especially to stop talking to each other about what we call in my program the truth. We say to Black men, can you muster up enough courage to tell the truth? Because if you can do that, you'll be able to start a dialogue, which I think everybody on this panel understands that it's that dialogue, that exchange of information around whatever the issues are, is the pathway to feeling better, getting better. So that'll be my opening statement, and I'd be happy to elaborate as we move along, but I don't want to dominate the microphone. So stigma is a major issue we have to deal with.
Okay.
Absolutely. And Dr. Neighbors, I think you opened this up with really what the core issue is around silence, right? It's that we have not created spaces within the Black community specifically for us to talk about the stigma around mental health and for us to really address the issues that we are experiencing. And I'll say, as the minister here in this group, that particularly given the importance of the Black church within our communities, from the civil rights before and after, the civil rights movement, I should say, before and after, the church has also been guilty of not providing these spaces and really saying to people, if you just pray about it, it'll go away. God can handle it. And yes, I absolutely believe that God can handle it, but God has also given us therapists and licensed clinicians, and He's given us people here on this earth that we can talk to about what's going on with us. I would add that the notion of vulnerability and masculinity, the Superman and Superwoman complex that we have, that the resilience that is in our DNA as Black people for all the things that we have survived, sometimes makes us believe that the things that we are experiencing are perhaps too small. Perhaps they are first world problems. Perhaps it's really not all that big of a deal. We sometimes experience issues of depression and anxiety in environments that look really great, in situations that on paper are exactly what it is that we've been praying for and asking for and working for, especially when we enter corporate America with our degrees and graduating from these Research One institutions, and we're making six-figure salaries and better, and we have perhaps not the corner office, but sitting close to the corner office in our organizations. These are not environments that people where we're from, many in our family might be familiar with, and on the outside it looks really, really great. And so I think we also really struggle with this notion of, it seems like I have everything that I wanted on my list. I have the car, the family situation looks nice, the house looks nice, the job looks nice, the salary and the bank account look nice, but yet I'm still experiencing these things. Shouldn't I just be happy for the lifestyle that I'm living, that I've worked for, that I've been blessed with? And so there's a guilt that comes there as well, that we're not as comfortable talking about and opening up with our friends, particularly if our friends have not achieved the same level of success that we have, or it also looks like our friends have it going on. And so if they're managing it and they're managing it well, and we're not, there's something wrong with us, is the belief that gets reinforced, why we don't open up and really talk about how we're feeling, how we're doing.
If I may just elaborate a little bit on those excellent points from Mr. Ahrens. So the first thing I want to say is just picking up on your last point. Looks are definitely deceiving. I mean, if all we know about anyone is what we can see, then we don't know very much. And this is why I'm really pushing dialogue and conversation. A lot of us look like we have it going on. And in fact, a lot of us have been successful, but you are absolutely right. That doesn't shield us from the stresses and strains of life. Now later on, I think we're going to talk about income and wealth and money. So there are some more things to say about that. But I also wanted to comment on something you said as the pastor in the group and prayer. And so I do want to mention that our studies show that when Black people are under serious stress, prayer is a very, very important coping strategy. I mean, our data show that people will pray over it. But I want to underscore what you said. That does not mean you don't do other things. It doesn't mean that you cut yourself off and isolate from your family, friends, and sometimes from mental health professionals. I mean, those things are not mutually exclusive. That's a message that we need to get out. And I think, that's essentially what I heard you say. And I just wanted to mention that our data back you up 100%. The third thing I'll say very briefly to pick up on an earlier comment, and that is this concept of masculinity. That the way, I'm in my 60s, so I was raised, by a very traditional Black man about what it meant to be, quote, show masculinity. And the way I've started to frame it now is I've called it tough guy syndrome. I was raised to be a tough guy, and that means like you don't show your emotions. And it means if you are having a problem, you're almost suffering in silence. And you're trying to be a tough guy by showing that you can handle all your business no matter what. And I'm here to say that is a bad mental health strategy. I hope everybody who hears me, that's a bad mental health strategy. Black men, unfortunately, we have a tendency to cut ourselves off from others precisely at the time when we need the help of others the most. So I'll just stop there.
Okay, thank you both. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and ask another question. And Mr. Ahrens, based on your last response, I'd like for you to lead this time. This question, and it has a lot to do with your comments regarding the corner office. Now, I'm not on the panel, but I'm itching to be at this point. The question is this: what are some stigmas around money? But also I'm going to blend it with the second question, and that is, can someone's social economic status impact their mental health? Yes, let's talk about money and mental health together.
Yes. Well, I think quite simply, and by the way, you're absolutely on the panel, so we want to hear your perspective too.
You're on the panel now.
Jump right on in. The answer is yes and yes, right? Mental health and money and economic status certainly are all blended together, and there are several examples that we can look at to see how that is. I would go back. There was a study done in 1998 that led to the creation of the ACEs index, which studies incidents of childhood trauma that people carry with them. And so could be that your parents separated, could be actual physical violence or sexual assault. There's a number of items and several variations of this ACEs score worksheet assessment, but it manages all the types of trauma that people carry with them. And the way that sometimes can show up for us as adults, we see it particularly well in children. in the way that, all of a sudden there's a student in a classroom who doesn't have really good relationships with anyone else, who's very withdrawn and sits in the corner, or acts out in really inappropriate ways. And when teachers, and my mother just recently retired after 35 years in education. So when teachers dig into what's really going on in the situation and the administrators get involved and social workers get involved, we often see trauma being part of why this child is acting out in the way that they do. Those traumas just don't disappear for us as we become adults, particularly when we've not gone through therapy and worked through them. And so you come into a situation in corporate America in the corner office, and you find out that you are the lowest paid person on the team. Everybody else is making $10,000, $15,000, $25,000 more than you. And you start to look at that as an assessment of your worth. As we think about toxic masculinity, and we see continually the way that Black women are achieving education degrees at a higher rate than Black men. And so Black man and Black woman get married. Black woman is making more, is becoming the breadwinner in the household. And that leads to questions for the man about, being the provider for the house and the role that he's supposed to have, particularly those of us that have been raised with fathers. My dad was an Army guy, who had certain standards about the way that we should be leading our households and the way that we should be showing up, right? And so our presence, the dollar sign that is attached to our year-end performance review and evaluation, absolutely sometimes gets conflated with our sense of self-worth. And that's why we have to do the work. That's why we have to understand that our worth is not a dollar amount. And I can tell you, I'm in my mid-30s, the dollar amount at the end of the day, at the end of my performance review, was never a great assessment of the value that I brought to any of the organizations that I worked for. It was drastically lower. And so if I allowed myself to really get caught up, and I did for a time, get really caught up in the race of who out of my peers could make it to six figures first, who was going to get promoted to the title, who was going to get the job where we were traveling to represent the company, right? Like all of those kind of trappings of success that we were after. And I found when I got there that it didn't take away from the anxiety, it didn't take away from the loneliness of being the only one or one of the few in the office and in the company, right? And so all of those other things were still true. And even though the economic success had come and the positional success had come and the influential success had come, I was still feeling odd man out and couldn't figure out why until I really started talking to some other people and building a community to find out I wasn't by myself.
And,
so
and when you started doing the work, I'll only add this comment that our intrinsic self-worth is what we need to focus on. And we have to realize that if you don't realize your self-worth is intrinsic and have that value, then when the things go, so does your self-worth. And you have to be careful to monitor that. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Neighbors.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a very complicated situation. I'll try to, give my perspective on it. It's a little different, but it's not inconsistent. So the first thing I'll say is that, again, I'm coming at this from a perspective that because of the research I've done, we sort of take 2 or 3 steps back in survey research and we try to paint a broad picture. So there are certain themes that we see, but the themes are not universal. They're general. So the first thing I'll say is that when we look at the relationship between what we sometimes call a socioeconomic position, which is typically income, education, occupation, and then later I'm going to say a little bit about wealth. But when we look at that big picture, there's no doubt that it's better to have more money than no money. I'll put it that way. When you are financially insecure, and I can see your smiles because I'm right.
I agree with that.
If you want to be stressed out, be in that situation where you can't make it to the end of the month and pay your bills and that kind of thing. So the first point I want to make is that there's good reason for us to be striving for financial success because it is extremely stressful to not have enough money. And in fact, one of my big disappointments with the United States is that we still have people living at or below poverty. Personally, it just makes no sense to me that in this country, with all the resources we have, that we have people who don't have enough money. But that's a societal problem. It's not, our problem per se. But chronic poverty is bad for your health, and it's definitely bad for your mental health because it's very, very stressful. So when you look at population health statistics, those of us who've been able to move up that socioeconomic ladder tend to have better health, better mental health in comparison to folks who haven't been as fortunate. So that's one point. But like I said, these are general themes. So no matter where you go up and down that socioeconomic ladder, you will find people who are experiencing at different points in their lives, what we might call distress. And maybe even that distress goes over into things like depression. So nobody is, immune from the emotional turmoil that comes from trying to make it. The third thing I'll say is that my research shows that one of the things that's really the most painful for us is the discrepancy between our aspirations and our achievement. So stay with me just a little bit. So you can be anywhere on this socioeconomic ladder, low, middle, high. But if your achievements are not quite matching your dreams, that is painful. I mean, we show that. That is very painful. And so I think this is part of what accounts for some of the things that Mr. Aarons was talking about, in terms of a lot of us are just grinding, working incessantly, trying to make it. Sometimes we are, trying to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, but very often we're also trying to achieve something that we set out for ourselves. Now, I'm going to stop there, but the big question is, well, why are we not always achieving what we dream for? And that's where the conversations start to veer into the unequal opportunities that are out there for Black folks, structural barriers that can hold us back. So I'll just stop there.
Okay, Yes, Omari.
Yeah, I just want to I think two things. One, completely, and Dr. Neighbor, I think we need a whole session for you just to present out your research because I
don't know about that, but
I am dying to hear it. So we're definitely going to connect. My mother told me and my brothers when we were younger that you can live life with money or you can live life without money, but that struggles come either way.
Yeah.
Right. And particularly as we think about the system of racism and white supremacy that we live in. Too often this summer, I was doing my clinical rotation at Boston Medical Center as a chaplain and working with a variety of patients, some of whom, not unlike us, Black people who had degrees, who were in stable situations, stable housing, employed, health insurance, right? And yet we're still caught in some of these systems of inequity that would show up. Black maternal morbidity, as an example, right? Health risk for Black women giving birth and the risk associated with that, excessive bleeding, fetal demise, like all of these things, right? And seeing people who were doing all the right things, as you just said, Dr. Neighbors, right? The aspiration that they had set for themselves and the work that they were doing still was not enough for them to be able to escape the system of inequity that is built around racism and white supremacy. And so we know that money is absolutely a solution, and it's an indicator of, and I should say it's not necessarily a solution, but it's an indicator of us being able to live a better, healthier, longer life, right? Because there are things that money gives us access to in terms of regular health care, in terms of neighborhoods to live in where there's cleaner air, right? Like all of these things that are economically driven. The other thing that I would say about dollars for us is that Black people tend to be more communal. And so many of us were raised with the adage of, as you climb the ladder, you've got one hand on the rung above you, so you're holding on for dear life and looking to go up, and you've got one hand kind of below and behind you looking to pull everybody else up in the family. And so many of us also are parts of our salary, not just supporting ourselves, but are supporting other family members, people who come to us, particularly first generation, second generation, college grads, first in our families or second generation in our families to hold professional jobs. My parents and my aunts, all professionals, they were all first generation in their family to go to college. But I'm the first generation in our family, and right now the only one that is in corporate America, which is a whole different set of expectations and workplace environment, right? So I got to the point where my parents were like, all we can do is pray for you. We don't really know what it is that you are experiencing in the environment where you are. But so many of us, I find my peers in corporate America are not just working and trying to climb the corporate ladder for themselves, for them to have something, but really that they are, in fact, lifting up their entire family, and in many ways, lifting up their entire communities with their salary and with the benefits that they are negotiating for. So there is this, there's an additional pressure that I think it comes to us when we talk about money and Black people having financial success, that it's not just about our own selfishness of being able to get the latest bag, the nicest car, the newest game system, but it's that we want to be able to live well, and we are also in some ways obligated to and responsible for helping our family and our broader community to live well also.
Just to
that is
elaborate,
so very true.
Yeah, just very quickly, I want to say that the way I was raised by my dad, especially, was to get a job and keep a job. Don't screw it up. Don't get fired. Like, just work. And so that's one of the problems we face in the Black community. Not everyone has a job. So chronic unemployment or even underemployment or part-time work. So that's one thing. Having a job gives you benefits. Sometimes I think the benefits, the health benefits, are almost better than the salary, because if you're trying to take care of your health and mental health, that means you need to access services. And services, mental health services, are not cheap. But if you have an employer who's subsidizing that, and all we have to do is read the paper and look at the tremendous variability in what we are charged across the nation, depending on where we are for the same services. So that's one issue, that we have to push. And right now, this really comes under the banner of social determinants of mental health. So employment, unemployment, income and wealth, poverty, these are social determinants that we really need to address. The second thing I want to make just very briefly is the distinction between income and wealth. So what I learned growing up is my lucky break was I was the child of two people who were working. They both had jobs. So we had income. What I learned later in life was that we didn't have wealth. In other words, we couldn't save money, but we were able to use the money that they were making to live what I call a very good life. So when I think about your question, one of the things I think about is how we get Black folks, more of us, in a position where we can build wealth in addition to income, because wealth is a very good safety net. If something goes wrong and let's say you lose your job, okay, now you have a serious problem. You're probably going to get another job at some point, but until that happens, you've got a problem. And we saw this happening in the pandemic, big time. So if we can build wealth is there to help us through some of those tough financial times. So I think one of the distinctions we need to think about is income versus wealth. Now, because of what you mentioned, enslavement, racism, and white supremacy, because you can't talk about racism without talking about the hierarchy. And the hierarchy they put in place was very clear that white people were at the top. So because of all of that, we're still paying for that today. And this is one of the reasons why we don't have the wealth we deserve to have. These are the things that are driving the disparities that we're all upset about. And these are the things that are causing us to get sick at disproportionate rates in comparison to other groups. So I'll just say amen to everything.
Okay, I have another question. I'm going to interject some comments prior to sort of switching gears just a little bit. I'd just like to say that I talked a little bit about this African-centered psychology. It really stems from bringing people back to our values. We are a people who have survived the Middle Passage, slavery, Jim Crow, now Jim Crow 2.0, and these new ways that people have had to kind of keep us down. One of the things Omari talked about, there are 6 principles to this psychology that are important to us as a people. And one of them you just talked about was extended self-identity. It is never just about you. We always have to have this communal perspective and bring others along with us. So I'm glad you brought that up. Another one we talked about was spirituality, how our spirituality has always helped us to get through. So in my day-to-day practice, I work in a clinic and most of our clients are impoverished and inner city people. So sometimes there are these disparities, and there's also this this imbalance that does not permit them to sort of ascend the ladder, if you will. We got a ladder with slanted steps sometimes, and so it's difficult for us through structural racism to rise. So to talk to them about getting back to these values, because I want you to realize that these values are what really sustained our ancestors, and we can't forget about those things. So I just wanted to throw that in. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, do you think there's an impact on mental health by not talking about finances within the home? Within our families, within workplaces? Do you think that contributes to our dysfunction?
I'll let Mr. Ahrens take that one.
Well, I'm happy to start us off, and
yeah.
Again, the answer is absolutely yes.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I would say, I'm a big believer. I think one of my superpowers is helping people negotiate their salaries. So I love the behind the scenes conversations. I love running. I'm not really a math guy, but I love running the analysis of cost of living in the city where you are and where you would be moving to if you took this new role. I love talking to people about if you stayed at your current company, what is the level that you would be next in line for, and what does that level pay, and helping them really kind of think through the decision that they're going to make about whether they stay or they leave or how they negotiate an offer. I think we don't have enough people to talk to about that, and we don't talk as openly about it, right? Now, I say that, and I say that with the caveat of I'm not about telling everybody my business, right? So I'm not necessarily trying to post my salary and my bonus amount and my 401k and everything. It's not going to go up on my Facebook or my Twitter, so don't follow me there if you're looking for that. But if you are in a situation and you're trying to understand, I had a young man from my church that I knew who was signing up for some papers with his first job in corporate America right when he graduated. Incredibly proud of him. His parents couldn't help him. understand like all these options and the Series 2030 fund versus the Series 2050 fund and long-term, because they didn't have any of that. They didn't have any of those benefits. So I opened up my 401k and all of my page so he could actually see the performance over time. This is what you're looking for, right? But I'm not doing that for everybody. I'm doing that for people who need that. That's not information I'm just posting. So I think you have to have relationships with people and identify the people in your network who are a little bit above you, who might know a little bit more than you do, who can help you explore different areas. My friends and I talk money, and not in the sense of trying to compete with each other, but each of us, one of my friends, when he got promoted, was the first one to get long-term incentives. We had no idea what that was, right? And so when I was negotiating my job offer, and I went in going, all right, here's the number that I want that they need to meet. Here's the bonus amount that I want to meet. Here's the number of vacation days that I want to be able to have at this company. I didn't understand that that was the basic stuff. And so when I got the job offer, the number was better than the one that I was expecting. The vacation days were more than I was expecting. The bonus amount was more than I was expecting. And if I hadn't had the conversation with my friends and if I hadn't had mentors, I would have probably just said yes to that offer and I would have left money on the table, right? And so you have to be able to be in conversation with people who can help you navigate that next level. Now, and I say that in the sense of just be nosy, going after people and saying, how much do you make and that sort of thing. But it is an open conversation that you should have in the sense of when you can help people, right? So it's not posting it on Facebook to brag about it, but it's being in relationship with people so that you can understand what it is that you're leaving on the table and that you have the skill for negotiation. One of the things we see, and I'll say specifically, it happens for Black men, but particularly for Black women, and I say this from my HR experience, the imposter syndrome showing up in salary negotiations is a very real thing. We've been taught in some ways to just be grateful for what it is that we're offered, and I don't see people successfully negotiate. I also have seen it. I've managed supplier diversity. And I look at Black vendors when we come to the table talking to corporate America and the prices we offer. I'm guilty of this as a independent consultant now. Sometimes I'm like, ooh, I think it really should cost this much, but I don't know that they'll pay me that, right? We all have these thoughts. But I can tell you from my days managing supplier diversity that white people don't have any problem asking for $25,000 when they just have a bachelor's degree. They don't have any clinical training. They don't have, books that they've written, right, necessarily. They come right out and they feel very comfortable and very confident speaking for themselves. We come in the room with all the credentials, with all the setup, with having invested in all the materials in the way that we can, and feel guilty about charging really what it is that we're worth for what it is that we're being asked to do. It's something I'm literally struggling with now, right? And I'm like, I know better. Mm-hmm. Right? All this experience I have from corporate America and helping people negotiate salaries, and it still catches up with me, right? And so these are ways in which it's deeply embedded in our community. Fortunately, I have people to talk to about it, right? And being able to talk to people and say, here's what they're asking me to do, right? Like other people who are consulting, I have some mentors who are doing this, who said, listen, I'll share some things with you so that you can get set up and that you can be successful. I'm gonna introduce you to some people so that you can get successful. And I'm able to have the behind the scenes conversations to say, here's what I think I should charge. Here's what they're asking for. And they say, why are you charging that? Like, you need to come on up. And I've also had times where my mentors have said to me, yeah, that's way too much. You don't have the credentials for that yet. That'll come in a couple of years, right? But you need people that you can have the honest, authentic conversations with who are going to give you the reality check about your current situation. Otherwise, you're floating out here. If you Google all these things, you're going to get 25 different processes and validations and charts to tell you how to do these things. You need to talk to people you trust and people that you have relationships with. So look around in your circle, see who are the people that you can talk to if you're not talking to someone now. And if you're looking around your circle and you're going, I don't have anybody, that I think I can talk to, reach out. I'm happy. I've got a very wide network of people who are very open. And so reach out to some people that you think maybe, I don't know if that person would talk to me. They probably would. But reach out to some other people who can connect you to some people so you can have some real conversations.
I like that a lot. Okay.
So if I can just tell, one brief story just to reinforce what we just heard, and I'll use myself as the vehicle for this. I had to, so the word that comes up when I listen to Mr. Aarons talk about the importance of, getting mentoring, the word that comes up for me is humility. So a person has to be humble enough to accept the fact that they don't know everything. So in my case, as a young man, I was grossly misinformed because I actually thought I knew everything I needed to know, which is just, being young and stupid. So when I got my first job, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to negotiate. And I thought I was actually doing something because I did negotiate on the salary. But where I messed up was, I didn't negotiate on anything else. All the other things that I didn't even know to get into because I didn't have enough sense to go around and ask the people who would have laid it out for me. So that's one thing I will say. Like, you got to be humble enough to get the mentoring you need. And this is a problem for men sometimes. I don't think I'm the only guy out there who thought, I got this. So, when you mess up like that, you better make it a teachable moment, because it won't be the last time you're presented with that opportunity to negotiate. The second thing I'll say is that we definitely need to negotiate. And I've had a lot of conversations with different people, and not everybody out there is comfortable in negotiating. I'm not sure why, but I never had a problem with negotiating. I just didn't know all the things I was supposed to negotiate about. I'm actually one of these people that I don't mind going and buying a car and, wheeling and dealing with the car salesperson, because I want to, I just like doing that. So I would say that you do want to have a number in mind, but you don't want to be the first one to throw out the number. So I've had many conversations with people. They're like trying to get my number, and I'm trying to get their number because I don't want to throw my number out there, because if the person says, oh, okay, yeah, we'll hire you for that, then I'm like, wait, hold up, that had to be too low. So, so there's a lot of, verbal jousting that goes on. And the other thing I've learned is no matter what number comes out from the other person, never accept the first number. The worst that can happen is, you throw out a higher number. The worst that can happen, they say no, but I've been surprised many times. They say, oh, okay, yeah, we can actually do that, or we can come close to that. So this is a very good conversation, and I'm sure it's related to mental health, somewhere, but, just being able to negotiate, for me, I think is an indication of your worth, your self-worth, and you want to get what you deserve. I think that's probably the lesson here.
Yeah. I would
Go
say
ahead.
two things very, very quickly, I promise. One is, I think we benefit from tools like Glassdoor, where you can look up, employees are self-reporting their salaries at different companies. If the company that you are interviewing with is not reporting on Glassdoor, you can at least look at some other companies or organizations of similar size in a similar industry, just to get a sense for what the numbers should be. And I think those are tools that are really helpful, that are self-service tools. And then I'd say on the mental health side of this, does absolutely go back to our value, right? It goes back to this notion in our community that we have to work twice as hard to get half as far as everyone else. We shouldn't necessarily have to make half as much money as everyone else in order to show up in the workplace, right? And those conversations, when you find out, when you're not socially excluded, and you do get invited to go out to happy hour with the rest of the team, and somebody at the table starts complaining about their quarterly bonus number being lower, and everybody else is like, yeah, that was crazy. I was expecting that. And you're like, I don't get a quarterly bonus. What are they even talking about? Like, I've had that happen. That moment is really, really painful. And it sends you home and into a place where you feel really helpless. You feel stupid because you're like, how could I possibly have not known? This thing has been happening. I'm a pretty smart person. My parents have raised me better than this, right? So we have all of that moment around maybe I am not enough. Maybe I don't actually deserve to be here. And those thoughts that creep into our minds have a real physical effect on our body and how we show up. It shows up in our voice inflection. For me, sometimes it shows up in the tension in my shoulders and in my upper torso. Sometimes I'll see it show up and my leg starts bouncing kind of uncontrollably. And I'm like, I don't even know what's happening right now, right? These things trigger responses in our body that then sometimes make us speak up too much, make us not speak up in the moments where we should, right? And then we get labeled as being quiet, or we get labeled as assertive or aggressive or confrontational, right? And these labels find their way into our performance reviews. We don't get promoted. We're held back. We're blacklisted inside of companies and organizations. And so the financial health and wealth that we experience has a direct correlation with our mental and physical wealth and our overall well-being, right? For ourselves and for our families. And so this is why the salary negotiations are really important, and thinking about the benefits, as you said, Dr. Neighbors, not just the overall salary number, but quarterly bonuses and signing on bonuses and year-end performance bonuses, all these other things that nobody ever talks to us about. People only talk to us about cracking our first $100,000 plus job, right? Once you've done that, you have made it. And that's kind of been the gold standard. That was what all my favorite rappers were rapping about in the 90s and early 2000s when I was coming up, $100,000, right? And once I made it there, and then I realized some of the other things that I was experiencing hadn't gone away. Some of those thoughts actually increased the higher my salary went, right? Was really when I realized I needed more help and I needed more support. I needed people to talk to, that the problem for me at that point wasn't a financial problem, right? I had thought solving my financial problem was going to solve everything. And then when the finances got solved and I was caught up on my cable bill and my car note was current and everything else was paid, I wasn't in danger of being thrown out of my apartment, and I still wasn't happy. It was because, as you said, Ms. McDay, the financial number, it was not actually my worth, right? But it took me hitting that and experiencing that success, which was important for me to also understand I still had more work to do after I had gotten there.
You really do. I think that one of the things I'd just like to throw in, just as a comment to follow up on what you just said, is that, the intrinsic self-worth is important as a value, but also think about this whole concept of materialism and material gain and how Eurocentric that thinking process really is. And as we've migrated toward more Eurocentric values of individualism and of materialism, it causes us distress. So I'm telling you that as someone who helps people in poverty every day, to overcome the distress of not being able to have things that other people have. So for a lot of the young single moms I see, that is their reality. And they're not hitting $100,000. So how do you stay healthy when that's not really an option or something that's in your foreseeable future? How do you manage? How did our ancestors do it? There was a study, I believe it was in Chicago, of men who were garbage men. And one of the ladies I work with, she always tells this story. And so they gave them this study to see how they felt, what was their job satisfaction, and, how they felt about being garbage men. And the outcomes were surprising. These men were happy. They were balanced, and they felt like we have a good income. We have a good job, and we can take care of our families. Now, this was in the 70s, but the reality is when we push towards this constant more and materialism and constant gain, it causes us emotional distress. So just think about that in terms of what we value. I'm going to go to the next question, unless you have something to add, Dr. Neighbors or Omari, or Mr. Ahrens, do you?
I would say most studies say that actually our level of happiness doesn't increase. I think it's after $70,000, right?
Really?
So even though there's this image planted in our heads of getting from 70 or 30 to 50 and 50 to 70 and 70 to 100 and 100 to 250 and beyond, and becoming millionaires and billionaires, a lot of the studies say after 70,000 your happiness doesn't increase.
No.
So there's something to think about. I still want to test it. When I become a millionaire, I would love to be in Dr. Neighbor's study, so he can test my level of happiness now and then. But I think that goes to your point around material wealth is one thing. There is a satisfaction of being able to be home and play with your kids, or be able to interact with your spouse or your partner, right? Be able to do things in the community, be an active member of your church or civic organization or fraternity and sorority. So there's a lot of ways in which we can experience happiness. We shouldn't put all of our eggs in one basket in terms of our employment.
I'll just say briefly, I saw a question pop up on the screen and then it went away, but oh yeah, there it is. This is a new technology for me. So I just wanted to comment briefly that the questioner, Mr. Sunderland, is correct. It's not always a failure in negotiation. I know we were kind of talking about our failures, and I know in my case, I mean, I considered it to be a failure because of my inappropriately inflated sense of self. I mean, I just was too young to know any better, I guess. So I think we have to own up to as much of the negative outcome as we can. Now, he mentions about seeking a less predatory culture. I'll just say that I never really felt that I was working in a predatory culture. It was a competitive culture, but there absolutely is no harm in changing jobs. If you feel like, I mean, the culture is just so toxic. I was raised not to change jobs. Like I said earlier, my dad said, get a job, keep that job, retire from that job. So that's what I tried to do. But later on in life, I actually broke that rule and I have moved around a little bit. And I think what we're going to find when we do change jobs is that we are employable. I mean, every job I've had, I've picked up skills. And if you're willing to step out on faith, because a lot of times you don't necessarily have a new job to walk right into when you leave your job. And I've left jobs because, it just wasn't a good fit for me. I know that sounds a little privileged, but I just had a sense of confidence that I would find something. So I would say to Mr. Sunderland, if it is predatory, you got to move on.
All right, we have about 5 minutes left, and rather than pose a final question, I think I'd like to give you both time for closing remarks.
Okay, well, I went first on the open, so I'll let Mr. Ahrens go first on the closing.
Oh man, Dr. Neighbors, I love hearing your comments, but I'll just start us. I'll say the wonderful discussion, and I'm so glad to have shared the stage with both of you and learn from both of your insightful comments. If there is a silver lining in COVID and all that we've experienced over the past 18 months, and you throw in state-sanctioned killings, you throw in a very contentious political climate, you throw in COVID happening, right? There's so many things that we can throw in. If there is a silver lining in COVID, I think it is that we're having more conversations like this, that we're thinking about and really acknowledging that we're all under an inordinate amount of stress, and that this environment that we're in right now is extremely stressful. We need spaces to talk about it. We need people to talk about it with. We need trusted colleagues. All the research around friendship and relationship shows that it is unplanned social interaction in close proximity that actually builds and sustains relationships and friendships. That's why we're friends with so many of our cousins that we played with over the summer, or people down the street, or people that we went to college with, or people that we were in cohort programs with. And COVID really limited our ability to do that because it wasn't safe to meet up. We had to be very planful, very careful. And so, I'm appreciating to a certain degree that we are having more conversations like this to really break the stigma around mental health, to really be able to publicly say we all need a little bit more help, and there's no shame in that. There's actually a great deal of strength, and as Dr. Neighbors brought up one of my favorite words earlier, courage. There's a lot of courage in that as well. Black Executive Men in particular is an organization that is on a mission to help men, Black men, really to achieve inner peace, to think about all the ways that they can find success and peace in their life, financially, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And so to find us, I'd say visit blackexecutivemen.com. You'll see information from our founder, Jewel Love, up there, ways that you can reach out and contact us. If you are on LinkedIn, there is a private group on LinkedIn. Black Executive Men is the name of the group. And if you want to have some conversations as well with me about salary negotiation or benefits negotiation, or I'm thinking about making this move, I'm happy to talk to you. You can find me at the Aarons Group. It's aaronsgroup.org, AARONS, aaronsgroup.org. Also on Facebook under Aarons Group LLC, and on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram, Aarons Group LLC, and all of those places. So thank you so much. It's really been great, my honor and my pleasure.
So I will sum it up very quickly. That the name of my research program is Man Up, Man Down. And we came up with that name because we think manning up to stress and problems works some of the time, but not all the time. So manning up, trying to man up to everything will definitely result in a man going down. But if you are the man down, if you reach out and talk to someone, you can be man up again before you know it. It's cyclical. So we say, if you feel something, say something. Talk to just one person, and don't forget to tell the truth. And what you're going to find is that you are not alone. You will find there are other Black men out there dealing with stuff. They're just not fessing up to it. And then once you get that out in the open, you've got not only a friend, but a confidant, which is going to definitely help your emotional well-being. So I can be found at Tulane University School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I'll be happy to talk to you.
Okay, thank you so much to both of you. I'm going to close as the mental health therapist with two things. If you find yourself in any type of crisis, for our panelists or people you know, there are national numbers. One of the text lines, if you are in crisis and you want to seek counseling or find a local counselor, you can just text 741-741, 24 hours a day. That's a national text line if you know someone or you're concerned about someone in crisis. The next thing I'd like to leave you with is an African proverb, and I just want everyone to think about this and walk away with it. Proverbs bring to you what they need to bring to you. So they speak to everyone differently. But here's the one for today. No matter the economy of the jungle, the lion will never eat grass. So with that, I'd like to close. It was my pleasure. Have a good day to everyone.
Like, do you even know who you are?